Good evening, everyone. I really want to thank everyone, from the public as well as the different agencies involved to really make it tonight here for the Solano Subbasin, our groundwater sustainability virtual town hall. So kind of a mouthful there, but really appreciate everyone. You're really making it to the chance for the town hall meeting to really learn a little bit more about groundwater here in Solano County, about our sustainability, really having a chance to ask questions and answers of experts and different entities here in the room today. So with that, again, just really want to welcome everyone and just thank you for really everyone taking the time out of your Monday evening and everyone's busy schedule to really be a part of today's town hall with the Solano Subbasin. So with that, I will turn it over to Jen and thank you very much, everyone.
My name is Jen Fox. I work with Ag Innovations and I'm facilitating this evening. As you've heard, we have Spanish translation available, so really appreciate the opportunity for that. For those of you who know somebody who might be interested in the Spanish version, we will be sharing this via YouTube. So if somebody didn't come, but you think they might be interested, want to make sure that you know that. Also want to make sure that you know that we're recording tonight, mostly so that we can get this out there for folks who were unable to be here right now. But for those of you who are here right now, just want to say we're going to have a really interactive meeting. I work with a nonprofit that leads community engagement for the Solano Subbasin, and my job tonight is really to help presenters share information and answer your questions and end on time. And just want to say that community input really is essential. And so we really appreciate your interest in groundwater, in the sustainability around the subbasin, and we're glad you're here tonight. Just want to share a little bit about our objectives today. As Alex described, we want to share more about the context of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, that we'll be having a panel discussing multi-benefit projects. We're going to invite your questions there, so want to mention that. We're going to talk about how organizations coordinate and share opportunities to get involved. Just mention, as you see on the objectives here, our meeting tonight is focused on sustainable groundwater management, but groundwater and surface water are linked. Groundwater and growing are linked. Groundwater and wells are linked. So, we're excited to have your questions. So please, we'll keep those going. On the next slide, I did put just an agenda for where we're headed today. In a minute, I'm going to turn it over to Alex. But before we go there, we've got a number of panelists who are spending their time they want to hear your questions, and we want to have an interactive discussion. So first, I actually want to launch a poll. I want to invite folks to answer this very first poll question. We'll go to the next slide, but people in the background can enter this question. Want to hear how many town halls you have attended. Is this your first time coming to a town hall? Tell us a little bit more about if this is your first time coming together around the Solano Subbasin, or maybe some of you have attended up to, I think, 7 town halls that we've had. So please go ahead and enter that. Let's see. So I'm seeing that for a quarter of the folks here, it's your first one. So really appreciate we've got those 20 minutes at the beginning to really help ground you a little bit in the map of the subbasin and how SGMA works, etc. And then just want to honor that for almost 2/3 of you've attended a couple town halls. So okay, how about the next poll question? So this one asks how you heard about the event, and just want to get a sense. A couple of folks mentioned this in the introduction, how you heard about it, but if you can just tell us, it's always good for us to know. And if you did hear about it in a way other than these 4 ways, a way that you would like us to continue doing outreach to, please describe that in the chat. Okay, great. It sounds like most folks heard from the Solano Subbasin newsletter, so really appreciate that. A few folks word of mouth. Thanks to those of you who spread the word. Really appreciate that. 2 more poll questions right now. Lupe, how about the next one? Could you actually say what SGMA stands for? And bonus points, we didn't ask it here, but maybe even, do you know when SGMA was passed? Lupe, I don't want to put people too much on the spot, but I'll invite you to share the answer to that poll. I hope folks are smiling with this question. This is a very important question for us because just want to acknowledge for those of us who work in this field, a number of folks on this call, 4/5 of us might know that SGMA is the acronym for the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. But we also really want to make this call welcoming for the folks who maybe are seeing that for the first time. We're going to try not to use too many acronyms, but we will also put links in the chats. That's a reminder for us panelists. Good to know. And the last poll question. For right now, we just want to hear from you now that you know what the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is. Wondered if you've seen the Solano Subbasin plan, or there's an annual report that just came out this past April, and you'll probably hear from us today. We actually have a state of the subbasin infographic about it. So please answer this poll. Let us know how familiar you are with these kind of reports. Great. So I'm seeing almost 2/3 of you have read parts of the groundwater sustainability plan or annual reports. Really appreciate that. Also want to know that those of you who haven't seen them or didn't even know about them, again, this first part of the conversation really is for you, for folks who are maybe a little bit newer to some of the sustainability conditions in the subbasin and some of the governments. So that's where we're going to head next. Alex, I'm going to turn it back over to you. You already introduced yourself, but maybe you can help us through a little bit about the background for sustainable groundwater management in the Solano Subbasin.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much. To give a little bit of background, and again, maybe kind of a teaser to some of those questions that were asked in the poll, it was back in 2014. So now that seems a while, but that was a little over, 10, now 11 years ago. The state was actually in a pretty significant drought. We were in a drought conditions. There were many issues down in the San Joaquin Valley, and folks may have seen, observed on the news, East Porterville was in the news. About 1,000 wells in that area went dry. It was certainly making the news. And again, the whole state was just seeing drought conditions. Locally in Solano County, we'd received about half of our annual rainfall. It was one of the drier years we've had. Little did we know we'd see it again 5 years later, a much more significant drought. This was really in 2014 that really prompted really the state legislature to really realize, we really need to deal with our groundwater. We're not really handling it. California was the last Western state, which these are the drier states, to really begin to manage groundwater. And so it was really in 2014 that the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act was actually passed and signed by the governor. I believe then Jerry Brown. And so again, that really at that point in 2014, that really set the stage for the groundwater laws that we know now that we are in about 10 years later. And so really, again, what happened after that was the state said, okay, we're going to pass this state legislation, and then we're going to actually, really leave it to the local agencies to develop what are called groundwater sustainable agencies. Try to avoid the acronym soup, but you're going to hear this, the GSAs, which are really the local agencies. And so that was really, again, what all the agencies that were in these basins, these medium and high priority groundwater basins, of which part of Eastern Solano County is in. And the state said, okay, you've got to form these GSAs, figure out how to do it. That requirement was by 2017. So a law passed in 2014. 2.5 years later, all the local agencies really had to figure it out, step up to the table, work with the public, and really figure out what kind of agency that would be. And again, that was done here in Solano County. We formed actually a variety of agencies. And so maybe if you could just maybe go to the next slide as it given a brief intro. Yeah, perfect. And so just in this background slide, it's very confusing, but essentially all the colors represent the local GSAs here in what's known as the Solano Subbasin. And then the state mandated by 2022, you had to submit a groundwater sustainability plan. So again, this was, you not only did you have to create a new agency, basically you had to create a sustainable plan to set the future or how you're going to manage your basin. So in 2022, the Solano Subbasin collectively submitted a plan, and then DWR had to review many plans across the state. Ours was approved in 2024. So DWR had about a couple years. We were probably in the lower priority. There are many other basins in much more challenging situation, but ours was approved in January of 2024. So just last year, this was approved. and really set the stage for our situation here in Eastern Solano County. One of the key things here is all of these basins throughout California have to be sustainable by 2042. We're pretty fortunate, as you'll hear a little bit more from Nick here in just a few minutes and others, because again, a lot of the surface water we have that's brought into Solano County, again, that you'll really hear about, maybe a little bit from Spencer, we're really fortunate. We're really lucky compared to a lot of other locations. But again, we have some areas to really pay a little bit more attention to. So in kind of a nutshell, again, we have now actually a variety of agencies here. You can see again the different color codes here includes things like the City of Vacaville, Solano Irrigation District, the overarching Solano Subbasin, the North Delta agencies, and then part of the basin's actually in Sacramento County. And so there's a little bit both in what's called the North Delta GSA and then some in the Sacramento County GSA. And so our goal is really, again, working together as a team. We have overall a groundwater sustainability plan, and then as individual GSAs, local, groundwater sustainability agencies, we're really working together to make sure we implement our plan, submit annual reports. And so that's, I think, kind of in a real quick nutshell of where things have gone. And then maybe if you can just skip to the next slide real quick. And that really shows, again, kind of this is called the Solano Collaborative, all the combined GSAs working together as a team to make sure we implement good groundwater management here in the Solano Subbasin. So with that, again, really want to give thanks for everyone here to learn a little bit more. I know there's a bunch of acronyms, but again, a lot has happened here over the last 10 years. A lot has happened in groundwater management, and we're really lucky here with our basin and the conditions that we are in here in Solano County.
I want to just really acknowledge, as Alex said, that there's a lot of funding. The Department of Water Resources awarded the subbasin a $4.4 million grant for implementation. So as Alex was mentioning, the panel will speak to some of the work on that. And then also the next slide shows this timeline, which really, kind of helps you to see what Alex was describing about, the long-term goals for this plan. So Nick, over to you.
My name is Nick Watterson. I'm a principal hydrogeologist with Ludorf and Scaminini Consulting Engineers, and we're part of the technical team that's been supporting the groundwater sustainability agencies in the Solano Subbasin, both in development of the GSP or groundwater sustainability plan. Now, as Alex mentioned, now that we have an approved GSP, we've been migrating into the implementation phase of that. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the groundwater conditions in the subbasin at a pretty high level, and then some of the implementation activities that have been ongoing. I did want to note that as a requirement of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, there are annual reports that are submitted every year documenting conditions for the prior water year. And so I think Jen mentioned that, and it looked like, quite a number of folks have read through either the GSP original or one of those annual reports along the way. And we'll give some high-level overview of some of that information. If you want to get in the details, feel free to go consult some of those larger, more voluminous documents. So when we're talking about groundwater conditions, certainly it's always important to understand some of the context, and precipitation and temperature are key drivers of water supply and demand. And so Alex mentioned some of the drought conditions that we've experienced, and this chart here shows annual precipitation trends since 1960. These data are based on data from the UC Davis station. We monitor a number of different stations throughout the sub-basin, but just frame of reference, station has a long period of record, and it's pretty helpful to understand some of these longer term trends. So you see we have wet years, we have dry years. Average precipitation over that period has been roughly 18 inches. And, and we expect, that those sort of patterns to happen, where punctuated of, wetness and dryness. And then we also have precipitation here shown in those orange dots. This is temperature, number of days above 100 degrees. And so what we have seen is, we do see years where it's hotter. This last year was one of those, quite a number of days above 100 degrees. And so, those do put a greater demand on the water supply. And so when we're looking at conditions, we're kind of thinking about both the supply, both from a precipitation standpoint, as well as some of the demand drivers, temperature and otherwise. So in the Solano Subbasin, we're definitely in a very fortunate position from the standpoint of a water supply portfolio. There's water available from both the Delta water supplies that represents a large fraction of the water supply in the subbasin. Alex mentioned some of the other surface water in the Solano project water. So that's water stored in Lake Berryessa. And then, of course, there's groundwater supplies. And so this chart shows the last 3 years, fractions of those different supplies. Groundwater represents roughly between a quarter and a third of the total water used in the subbasin. The water supplies from the Delta representing the largest fraction, and that includes State Water Project water as part of that graphic there too. And then the Solano project over the last 3 years has been, somewhere between 150 and 170,000 acre feet of water going to the subbasin. There's additional water that goes to other parts of Solano County, but this is the fraction to the subbasin. And so just to kind of get a sense of this is our trends in water storage in Lake Berryessa. It's just showing a chart of the peak spring storage level. And so we can see, it's gone up and down a number of different times. I think, as we all probably can appreciate, it's pretty much topped out. I think it spent maybe about 90 days plus or minus a little bit, spilling out of Lake Berryessa. So that's topped off at roughly 1.5 million acre feet. And then this is where the Solano project water is derived, which roughly delivers on the order of 200,000 acre feet per year. So a very fortunate situation to have this large surface water supply available to serve the subbasin. And then this chart shows some of the recent groundwater pumping trends since 1991. These are estimated groundwater pumping values. I just want to make that clear. We combine measured groundwater pumping for some wells that have meters on them, but the reality is most wells do not. And so those we estimate that other groundwater pumping using modeling approaches. And so we're showing, again, similar to what we see with the precipitation. We see years where pumping is greater. We see years where it's less, and it kind of bounces around that average. In 2024, it was about 150,000 acre feet of pumping. That was very similar to the previous water year. And but there, as we can see, during some of those drought periods, there was pumping that was in excess of 240,000 acre feet. So it varies depending on the year. That's to be expected. And I mean, one of the keys here is to make sure that the subbasin is managed in a way that you bank the water when you have it during those wetter periods, and then you can rely on it during those drier years when you need to pump groundwater. In the subbasin, we have a number of different monitoring networks that we use to track conditions. This graphic here shows some of these select wells that we call representative monitoring sites. So they're sites that have been curated to represent conditions and help us track how things are going. We have representative monitoring sites for water levels, water quality, and subsidence and stream flow, and a number of different other aspects that we're tracking. This slide here and this map shows changes in groundwater levels from over the water year from fall 2023 to fall 2024. The warmer colors here, those reds and oranges, are sites that had a drop in groundwater level of various magnitudes, and then the bluer dots show wells that had increases in groundwater levels, and then the greens are wells with no significant change. So, and roughly what we're seeing is, this is what we have is we have some areas where we've got groundwater levels going, that have changed downward in this year, and some going up, but overall, things are relatively stable. I did want to highlight that for each of these wells, we also are tracking the longer term conditions, and so we've got charts similar to these examples shown here for each of these wells. And what we can see on the upper one is there is a trend over the last 20 years for some slightly downward decline in groundwater levels. And that's in this area, what we're calling a Northwest focus area. It's an area where we're placing additional attention on implementing activities to make sure that it doesn't develop into a condition that's more concerning. And then down in the lower graph, you can certainly see in other parts of the subbasin, where we've got very stable groundwater levels. And and so kind of the emphasis on, we've got these wells, and each one of these has its own little signature for what's going on. Um, but they're, and they're really helpful for our interpretation of what's going on. I did also want to note that one of the things that's evident in this top chart is the Solano project coming online. So that the project was completed in the late 50s, and water was starting to be delivered in the late 50s, early 60s, and we see that rebound, that great increase in groundwater levels as a response to the Solano project. So just important, just to note that the great importance of that surface water supply to two of the groundwater resources. And then I just want to mention some of the water quality constituents that are also being tracked. These are three different, just three of a number of constituents that are being tracked: nitrate, arsenic, and chromium-6. These are three key constituents that are related to drinking water quality. So nitrate is a constituent in groundwater that can come from septic systems or fertilizers or some other activities. These are all these dots on this map on the left are concentrations of nitrate in groundwater, and the red dots here showing concentrations above the drinking water standard of 10. And most of these data points are from wells as part of the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. So they're mostly in agricultural areas, small residential, potential, rural residential parcels. And so it's certainly, these red dots are something that important to track, but I did want to note that there's other programs that are focused on regulating water quality issues, and so the groundwater sustainability plan has some aspects of that in it, but I just want to note the important to recognize these other programs that are working towards addressing water quality issues, especially nitrate. Arsenic is a natural occurring constituent in groundwater. It has a drinking water standard of 10. That's the wells here above red are those that exceed that standard. Generally, the only data we have here are from public water supply wells. And so that's why we just don't have as much information. But the distribution shows that it's largely in the southern part of the subbasin, and it's something that some of the water purveyors down in the southern part of the subbasin have to be certainly very aware of. Chromium-6 on the right here is also a naturally occurring constituent, and it has a recent drinking water standard that was set at 10 micrograms per liter, and those dots above that 10 threshold are orange and red here on this chart. And again, it's generally the only information we have for this chemical is from drinking water wells. But you can see some of the noted areas with chromium-6 in the Dixon area, Vacaville area. It's largely an issue it's a bigger issue at greater depth in the groundwater system. So which is part of why it tends to become a challenge for some of the urban water providers that use groundwater. That was a little bit on some of the existing groundwater conditions, including water quality. I did want to pivot a little bit to mention some of the activities on the GSP implementation efforts. One of the things that was identified during the GSP preparation was a need and a benefit to having a better understanding and refined understanding of where wells were, where surface water diversions, and what areas of the subbasin were being served by groundwater versus surface water. So some of that information we certainly had, but there was we definitely felt that there was an important need to refine that understanding. And with the support of a DWR GSP implementation grant, we've been working to do that. And this has been a coordinated effort among a number of different stakeholder groups, including the resource conservation districts, both Solano and Sacramento County, and then very importantly, with the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, also providing, volunteering, I should say, really important and helpful information to that. So it's this effort's just been, I just wanted to note, it's been a really collaborative effort, and the product coming out of it has really refined our understanding, and is developing some processes that we can implement in coordination with the counties to maintain the data that we have, and the currency of that data. And on some of the other efforts, number of different activities going on that I think you'll hear some of the panelists coming up talk in a little bit more detail about. But the focus really is on enhancing groundwater recharge, building resiliency to whatever the climate future looks like, making sure that we've got the buffer to withstand those drought periods. And there's a strong focus on projects that have multiple benefits. And so those, the primary benefit may very well be groundwater recharge, but there's also a strong interest in looking at how we can have additional benefits, whether that's benefits to habitat or benefits to stormwater management and flood control. And so I think you'll hear a little bit more about that in the panelists coming up, but it's been a lot of effort going in that direction, and that's really where a lot of the focus is as we mentioned, the groundwater conditions are in good shape, but it's, we need to be always thinking forward and proactive about getting ahead of it to make sure that we can maintain that going forward. So I think with that, Jen, I'll turn it over to you.
And with that, the next slide will show everyone. We're going to switch to the question answer feature, and we really appreciate your questions. What I'm going to do right now, you can see Nick and Alex on your screen. I'm going to invite any questions. All you have to do is click on that question box, and then that will bring up, we invite you to ask questions. You can see questions that other people are asking. And so want you to use that box. And I'm going to kick it off with, while folks are typing in questions, I'm going to kick it off to you, Nick. Maybe if you, I know you and LSCE we're really lucky to have you working in the subbasin because you guys work elsewhere in the state. Can you just share how any groundwater trends are in the Solano Subbasin compared to other areas? You certainly talked about kind of some of the historical context, but what about other areas nearby around the Solano Subbasin?
Generally speaking, the Sacramento Valley is by and large in much better shape than, I think, as we all can appreciate, than the San Joaquin Valley. I think there are certainly subbasins that have a little bit more work ahead of them to maintain or achieve sustainability. But there are folks that are experiencing some more challenges with groundwater, and there's the pressure on water resources just continue to grow, right? And so I think it's also not only about what conditions are now, what they've been historically, but making sure that you have you're set up to be able to handle whatever is around the corner, over the next however long, long horizon.
Yeah, great. And I'm going to turn to one more question. I want to invite folks to make sure you're using the question answer and use that feature, because that'll allow everyone to see your questions. So want to ask people to turn to the Q&A on the bottom. But do want to bring up, before we go to the panel, which we'll do in a moment, do want to bring up just two quick questions. One, Nick, you brought up a little bit about water quality, and there was a question that came in, talking about the fact that the national standard is 100 parts per billion, but the state has a strict standard. And if Nick, can you say anything about hexavalent chromium? I know this is something that Vacaville is needing to do a lot of work on. Yeah.
I won't say anything about why the difference between 100 and 10, beyond that it was set by, there's physicians and medical, considerations, I think, involved that are way outside of my realm of expertise. But I will say that the 10 parts per billion was I think it was, I can't remember the exact date, but I think it was maybe 5 years ago. It was first initiated, and then they rolled that back because there was not sufficient an economic analysis. And it's my understanding that, I think the number of systems that are now going to have to take some action to get below that 10 parts per billion, it's significant statewide. And so this is not something unique to Solano. It is something that a lot of water systems throughout the state are facing. But yeah, I mean that's probably all I can say, other than the geology of our area definitely predisposes us to having that constituent in the groundwater. It's what it is, and the city of Davis, Winters, other cities in that area, are also facing some of the same challenges.
Yeah, and Jen, maybe I'll jump in. This is Alex with Water Agency, because I think, as Nick said, I mean, this is for Solano. This is a big issue for the city of Dixon, who's 100% groundwater dependent, and then for the city of Vacaville, which is a bigger city, but about a third of their water supply comes from groundwater. Many of their wells in both cities, I think Dixon, maybe almost every well, and many wells in Vacaville. And the challenge is, again, it's many millions of dollars per wellhead that you've got to install, water quality treatment. And so I think this is, again, from a local perspective, I think, and certainly I think there were some comments that, again, it's really expensive. And again, ultimately that's passed down to ratepayers that have to pay, really expensive water rates, particularly on something that the federal standard is 10 times higher and has been that way, I think, for many, many years. So I think it's a challenge, in Solano, I think for both our cities, Vacaville and Dixon. I think, as Nick said, this is an issue that Davis, admittedly, though, Davis went to surface water. So Davis, Woodland, obviously now blend with surface water is one of their strategies. And that's a little bit more challenging for Dixon. And Vacaville does that as well, but they need that groundwater supply as well. So I think, again, sort of a challenge, I think, from a policy standpoint. And again, sometimes the challenge with the state water board providing mandates that then, again, local agencies have to, sometimes struggle with or kind of lift up and figure out how you fund or raise, again, ratepayers. So again, sorry, Jen, just want to jump in. I think it was, again, worthy just to kind of have a few minutes on that.
Yeah. And just want to thank folks that are jumping in with questions. And there are some coming in. And so we'll turn to those maybe after the panel. With the next slide, I want to show folks that, we're going to turn to these kind of practices that can do things like detain stormwater, increase infiltration, help with water quality. And so what we're going to do right now is turn to a few panelists. Really appreciate them sharing their time. But before we do that, also want to mention that last year we had panelists. I really want to thank them. We heard from Austin Miller, who talked about the work in the Sacramento Area Sewer District project to provide recycled water for agricultural and habitat conservation uses. Kelly Huff and Tommy Bottoms talked about recharge and cover cropping, and we're gonna share the link in the chat to a video archive so you can check out those conversations, just like we'll be sharing a link to this one. And if we go to the next slide, though, I want to focus in on kind of what we're going to talk about with this year's panel. And again, Alex is going to talk a little bit about projects that provide multiple benefits, including recharge in dry years, reducing flooding and wet periods, improving habitat and soil health. So Alex, I'll turn to you for a quick introduction to the panel. And then after we hear from Amy and Spencer, we'll continue with your questions. So just want all the participants to know, please type in questions. I see some here, and we'll come to those after we get a brief overview.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Thanks so much. And again, I think there'll be a panel folks from Solano RCD with Amy King, and then Spencer Bay, that's really involved in local farming practices in the region. And again, just to kind of provide an overview, this is something that, again, technical staff really from the variety of Solano agencies are really kind of putting our heads together, really kind of seeing, again, what are options, realizing the Northwest focus area is kind of an area where, as Nick said, really where a little bit more attention, sustainability is is worth really thinking about. It's also an area, again, that's one of the few areas that doesn't receive surface water. So again, there's a nexus there where, again, maybe there's some solutions to be had. And so really what the group is looking at is again, are there ways to basically reuse stormwater? And as the way Solano County works is a lot of our precipitation will land in the Vaca Mountains. And really, again, this is in the North Vacaville, Winters area, and then really runoff actually from west to east across Solano County, oftentimes, with flood issues. And so, again, I think maybe we'll hear from Spencer and Amy and others is, again, this is a really good opportunity to really, again, kind of, what's one person's problem could be a solution, again, with some creativity and some thought process behind that. The idea is also how it might we use existing infrastructure and really, again, optimize that, again, a variety of methods and thought process behind that. So again, I really just wanted to highlight just some ideas. I don't want to take away the thunder from, again, some of our really good speakers we have that are going to be touching on that. And I think we'll be maybe having a Q&A near the end of it as well. So again, with that, maybe we can go to the next slide as well.
Great. Yeah, and Amy, if you want to mention some of the collaboration and then keep us going.
Oh, sure. Well, so yeah, this is kind of really just a snapshot and not totally inclusive of a large group that has been kind of, like Nick and Alex both mentioned, kind of putting our heads together over the last year or so to try to think about the ways we know water moves, where we know it causes problems, and what we can do to both kind of address those issues and kind of have the bonus of recharging groundwater and offering more resilient water supply moving forward. So stuff that we've been batting around can involve revegetating the upper watershed, particularly, kind of the LNU fire scar happens to coincide with the Northwest focus area pretty darn well. So lots of potentially vegetative solutions we can do up there to keep water in place. Things like creating detention basins, maybe repurposing tailwater return systems that used to, move tailwater back into irrigated ground and are just kind of hanging out, could maybe be used for stormwater detention and groundwater recharge, and then just kind of everywhere we can get vegetated, the better, to kind of mitigate storm flows and put that water into the ground. Yeah, this is a little bit of what I just said, largely that. Everywhere we can think of doing it, we'd love to sort of to vegetate and get that subsurface root structure established to help, every raindrop that hits the ground infiltrate as much as possible. Like Alex mentioned, we're looking at existing infrastructure, things that we've tried before in some areas, maybe expanding, taking advantage of infrastructure that farmers already have on field, and then wherever possible, vegetating it. And of course, from the RCE perspective, we're always trying to vegetate everything because we love all the co-benefits that stuff has as well. Anytime we vegetate the ground with native plants, we increase wildlife habitat, we sequester carbon, we improve soil organic matter over time, and we provide shade for livestock. And this has been kind of an interesting moment in time to work on groundwater recharge and flood mitigation, right when the Solano County Farm Bureau sort of led the way in getting a bunch of funds from the California Department of Food and Ag to a healthy soils program available locally to Solano County and four other counties. And so I just wanted to share this. It's kind of interesting stuff that's happened just in the last year. These are the acres of productive land that have been signed up under contract with CDFA and the Farm Bureau to install these practices, all of which will help recharge groundwater, and all of which have these other benefits, including wildlife habitat and particularly like the buildup of soil organic matter and soil health attributes over time. We'll pass it to Spencer.
Hello, how's everyone doing? I think it's really important to tell the story, and that's what this program does. Is it tells the story. It allows everyone the insight to our subbasin, and it creates synergy amongst different groups within the subbasin. And the common theme is, how can one benefit the other? And we're kind of in a unique situation where from different types of agronomic crops that can help us, water flows, city interaction, just a lot of different types of synergy that can help our subbasin. One thing that I, as a farmer, that I have to point out, and I think it's just really an outstanding job of our predecessors, was the forward thinking to come up with the idea to understand that there was an excellent watershed in Berryessa, and then to take it to the next level to dam and provide surface water for our area was an incredible feat, and it helps us with what we're talking about today, keeping sustainability within our subbasin, whether it's through recharge with surface water, also the fact that possibly you're not using as much deep well water because you have the surface water in certain areas, and then the synergy from one district, then tailwater return to another district, and then whatever may transpire from all those different groups, whether it's farm practices with tailwater return systems, irrigation system. It's just you're constantly taking water, the resource, and you're utilizing it throughout the subbasin, generating, a lot of cooperation and synergy. So those are some of the big things that I take away from it. And then also as a steward, a farmer, it's our job to say, okay, hey, they touched on it. Amy touched on it already. It's always a good practice to try to keep something growing in the ground. So whether it's green crop or pasture for agriculture or weeds, all of those types of things with proper rotation just add to what we're doing in our subbasin. The slide to the left that you're looking at cows in a pasture. Okay, well, that's allowing infiltration year round because that's permanent pasture. Okay, the slide to the right is an example of green manure, a cover crop. From a rotational standpoint, rather than leaving the ground bare, they planted a cover crop. The cover crop in this particular photo looks like there's some type of a legume, which possibly is adding nitrogen back into the ground. It's also, it looks like maybe some type of a radish, which is a deeper rooted type of plant that allows for infiltration. It's just nature's way of opening up the ground to allow infiltration. As you know, runoff leads to an abundance of problems. So it's always best to try to keep all of that rainwater and summer water. You want to keep that on site. So, talking points, we're very fortunate where we live, and we just have to tell our story. And I think that's the big takeaway here is tell the story so that everybody understands, what's going on in our subbasin, so that we can continue to reap the rewards.
Yeah, well, thanks for telling a couple of those stories. And why don't I invite all the panelists to join Spencer on camera? With that in mind, I'm going to shoot to some questions that have been asked already in the chat. Alex, I think I'll turn to you on this one to start this one first. Thomas is asking, what are the latest developments on the State Water Board effort to require unimpaired flows in Puda Creek and the management of minimum pool levels in Lake Berryessa and the potential effects on surface water availability? So, yeah.
Yeah, so this is a great question. And I would say something, from the water agency perspective, really from all of our water purveying agencies here in Solano County, it's really the topmost of our concern. And to give a little bit of background, this was really, going back in 2023, this is the State Water Board really, went out and said, really, entities all across the Sacramento Valley, please give up 55% of all your unimpaired flow. So if you didn't have dams or reservoirs, over half your water, we want you to put it into the Bay Delta. Here in Solano, that's a really big issue, both from Berryessa standpoint. We capture actually very efficiently on Puda Creek, also an issue in the Delta on what that means as well. And so where things have gone is obviously we've been really concerned. We've had a variety of our community very strongly engaged with the state on this. The state did an update here in October of last year. They updated. It didn't get better for us, so obviously we continue to be pretty engaged. And there were formal meetings from December through January, into this year. We had, several of our elected members, our Solano elected members, which includes part of our county board of supervisors, as well as the mayor from Suisun City and their city council members were actually very active in really informing the state, hey, we understand your perspective, but this is really going to impact our community, both from an urban and agricultural standpoint. We had a variety of technical staff really from our various Solano cities, the water agency, Solano Irrigation District have been really strongly engaged because of just the level of concern. And so where things are at, we've sent many letters to the state. We've had technical staff, we've had electeds really formally, inform the state board. There were 11 working meetings over from January through March, just a few months ago, that many of us, myself and the irrigation district, were in attendance. Really kind of continue our message of, hey, we've got a really good thing going here on Poudre Creek. And again, we think that message has been successful. But again, we're still really keeping our community pretty well informed, and continue to really work with the water board as much as we can. It's been a little bit of crickets lately. It's been quiet. We anticipate that the state water board is going to do an update here later this year, and we're going to be really scrutinizing that and really making sure we're protective of our, again, really our Solano water agencies, our ag and urban agencies, because of the impact this has. And so again, really trying to be aware of it. One of the programs I would say the governor is very supportive is what we call Healthy Rivers and Landscape, and that is an alternative rather than just sort of empty our reservoirs. And the idea is, well, let's give up a little bit more water that's manageable. Let's help fund some science and some monitoring. And we've been really supportive of that. Again, we're in the middle of actually trying to get permits of a restoration project out near UC Davis and Pedrick Road, so right on the Yolo Solano boundary. And so we're really excited. We've been working to get permits, which I think you could build development, a neighborhood almost easier than permitting for a restoration project. But again, we're pretty committed locally to see that project through. And again, we really want to see that, really succeed. We're also getting ready to celebrate 25 years of what we call the Poudre Creek Accord of, we've had really good management here of both balancing water, environmental supply, protecting agricultural farms, as well as our urban agencies. And so we're going to be celebrating 25 years of just really what a success it has been here. We plan to do media releases, really to, again, kind of really keep the state informed in the sense that, we've got a really good story. We've got good success here of really trying to balance what can be challenging. And so I think it was a really good question. There's a lot going on, and really our Solano agencies are really plugged in and really committed to really protect our community on this, and really as much as we can keep the state as informed of really the success we have here. So again, hopefully that answers, and that's a great question.
Yeah, and really appreciate kind of, folks, as we mentioned at the beginning, surface water, groundwater are interrelated. And so these kind of multi-benefit projects that the panel is talking about, lots of relationships. And I want to invite people, remind you to feel free to answer the poll if you have ideas or if you have questions for the panelists, bring them up. I want to turn to stories in a minute with a question for Spencer. But first, Nick, one question that came in during your panel that we didn't get to was about someone asks, Thomas asks, what's going on with subsidence in Yolo County? And I, want to recognize this is about the Solano Subbasin, but I know we talk with the Yolo Subbasin a lot, and they're doing a subsidence study. So maybe, Nick, you can just mention a little bit about how groundwater management affects YOLO and yeah.
Yeah, well, no, certainly, I would defer to the YOLO folks to provide a real detailed response on that. But I will say that, our attention clearly has been focused on Solano, and where there is little or no subsidence of concern. YOLO, I'm not aware of any significant subsidence issues in YOLO County. I think all landscapes and basins have some amount of natural subsidence, whether it's seasonally going up and down. Just the matter of natural groundwater level fluctuations result in some amount of displacement of the land surface. But yeah, I'm not aware of any significant challenges on the subsidence front in YOLO. There might be a few focus areas where they're tracking that a little bit closer. But they are doing a subsidence, expanding their subsidence monitoring network using a number of different benchmark sites to survey. But fortunately in the Solano Subbasin we have 4 really high quality continuous GPS stations that measure at really high accuracy and high precision and very frequently. And so we're supplementing that monitoring with data available from DWR to track things basin wide. But yeah, I think that's all kind of I would want to say without pushing it over to Kristen Sicky and her crew to weigh in on the YOLO conditions.
Yeah, thanks. And appreciate that folks have a whole range of questions. Spencer, wanted to turn a question to you. I feel like you mentioned stories, and I know, for example, you talked at the tomatoes growers meeting. You also kind of have talked a little bit about winter wheat and rangelands and things beyond just cover crops. Wanted to see if you might share, another example for us. You mentioned, yeah, I feel like there's so many, but maybe pick another one. I think it's important for people to hear some of these stories.
Sure. I think sustainability and economic survival on the farm, they coexist. They run hand in hand. So not only do you have to be an excellent steward of sustainability, you've also got to be a good businessman and understand, crop rotations and economics. So you juggle the two, and you it's a constant balance between the two. For example, we understand for like growing the crop corn is tremendous for what it does to the ground as far as the inputs. It dries out the ground, it breaks up disease pressures and things like that. But there are times when it doesn't make sense from an economic standpoint to have that type of a crop in your program. So you're constantly tweaking your rotationals so that you can still gain some of the benefits from other crops with maybe it's a wheat crop, or maybe a hay crop, or maybe even it's just that pasture land, or you'll rotate maybe into an alfalfa crop. But you're constantly juggling what's best for your ground, and also what makes you a dollar. So the two run hand in hand. A good example of that would be you've got an orchard, for example, and let's just say it's an almond orchard. You'll possibly put a cover crop in the middles, or you'll let your middles go. And what I mean by middles is you'll leave grassy, weeded areas in between your tree rows. Okay, you'll do that for a couple of different reasons. One may be infiltration, winter rainwater, and then also so that you don't have runoff. Another might be flotation, so that you can access the crop during winter months. So if you need to do maybe a spray or whatever. But those types of thinkings where you're putting sustainability with economics, those are the types of practices that the good farmers and a lot in our area are doing. To answer your question, that was kind of long-winded.
No, I feel like there's so many examples that you have. And yeah, Amy, any other examples that you want to share, ways that you've been talking to people about kind of some of the multi-benefit opportunities?
Oh, sure. I think where it gets a little interesting on a landowner by landowner perspective, there's like Spencer mentioned, there is so much you can do on a farm, which is a system you're kind of accustomed and equipped for moving through different kinds of vegetation. But we also really find it interesting and potentially pretty beneficial to work with some of those kind of like rural residential 5 to 20 acre landowners with a little bit of topography. And so a lot of times, kind of even before we were having a conversation about groundwater recharge, we were often having conversations with landowners interested in establishing native plants, which is tricky, and with minimal input. And so we are always happy to meet with anybody and brainstorm with these sorts of questions. But where you've got low-hanging fruit on your property, you've got a little dip, so it's going to hold on to a little more extra water. That's where we want to establish some vegetation in the winter and be able to kind of not have to hold its hand too much to withstand a really dry summer. Um, planting appropriate, stuff that's can handle our super dry summers. If you've got a roadside, even, if it's a county road and the county's got a 20, 30 foot buffer jurisdiction that you don't really want to mess with, they're going to deal with that. But you've got another like 10 feet until your driveway. There's an opportunity to just, if you've got it, seed something, seed some perennial native grasses that hold on to the water so much better than kind of the annual weedy stuff if you have the opportunity. Just if we all kind of pick and choose places that offer good bang for your buck. That's always really fun to think about. And, almost every piece of property, no matter how big or small, has a number of them.
Yeah, great. I'm going to bring in one more question that just came in, and then I'm going to be turning to our last panel. But so this question for groundwater recharge, are you looking at percolation basins or injection wells or other methods? And what are you seeing as promising sites?
Do you want me to take that one? All right. Well, yeah, I'll just jump in. I think I would say we haven't excluded any things from the concepts that we're exploring. I will say that probably injection wells have some can have some potential benefits in the sense that the idea with an injection well is essentially getting water down to greater depths quickly. But it comes with some other challenges, both on the maintenance side, or primarily on the maintenance side, and then also just some of the the volumes that you can maybe inject are might be a little bit more limited. So that's kind of, I would say that's probably not on the top of the list. I think a lot of what we're working within is percolation basins or some sort of recharge basins are certainly on the radar and are being looked at. But as Amy and Alex, I think, mentioned, some of the natural landscapes as well, and the functions that those landscapes can serve, including even just distribution systems or drainage systems, and then using some of those systems to naturally percolate water. Kind of one of the ideas tying into the existing some of the existing tailwater return systems that are now maybe not used in the same way or needed for those same purposes, and seeing if we can repurpose those. And so really it's kind of looking at trying to work within the landscape, work with, along the lines of what Spencer said, making sure that whatever we do with the landscape, it doesn't create unintended consequences or unnecessary or unacceptable burdens on some users in the subbasin. But it's a slightly nuanced thing from the injection wells, but it's certainly also the dry wells and other ways that you can maybe, especially in areas depending on your hydrogeology, if you need to punch through some sort of a stratum or a layer that doesn't readily allow recharge, but you want to get it through there. There are mechanisms to go about that. So, but that's I don't know, in a long-winded roundabout way. Yeah, we probably are, we are considering all of those in different ways. Some are kind of, probably lower on the list of priorities because of some of the maintenance issues or other cost issues, but it's all still being considered. And a number of concepts have really, been floating to the top as sort of where we're dedicating most of the time.
And Nick, maybe, or Jen, I was going to just maybe kind of pair a little bit. And another idea is, for example, there's periods where Lake Berryessa, spills for many, many days, months at a time. And this last year, it spilled, as Nick said, it spilled for 87 days. We had flood flows that we couldn't utilize, amounted to about 56,000 acre feet. So, I mean, that's a lot of water. Again, that certainly has benefits, probably some benefits, but a lot of it is actually many weeks of just flood waters going down Lower Poudre Creek. And so that was one on our mind is, that doesn't happen every year. That's more sporadic, but is there a way to at least maybe use a little bit of that for recharge, run it through, as Nick said, maybe some of our existing systems, because it's sometimes, again, 87 days represents about the average spill for Berryessa. There are some years where it'll spill many, many months at a time. And so it's again, there may be an opportunity, not every year, not every other year. But again, that's a lot of water that if we could, optimize a little bit more, run it through some of our existing drainage systems, and get a little benefit off something that, again, to be able to use it would make a lot of sense here locally in Solano County.
With that thought, at the beginning, Nick showed us some slides about, precipitation and temperature, and that we're going to have dry and wet years. Alex just mentioned, there's going to be a variation. And I think what we want to do right now is turn to a few other Solano representatives to talk about additional programs that affect groundwater. And note that groundwater is important for both urban and rural areas in Solano County. And just want to highlight that a couple of years ago, we talked about plans for cities. We've already, in this call, we talked a little bit about Vacaville. Vacaville also has a recycled water effort and is working on this water quality. But this year, we're going to start with Misty of Solano County, who's going to introduce herself and just talk about One Water and drought response. Again, talking about the fact that there might be, more dry years. It's not always going to be the chance to spill from Lake Berryessa. So Misty, we'll turn it over to you with the next slide.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks all. My name is Misty Coltwriter in Solano County, the Water Resources Program Manager. And tonight I'd like to give a kind of a brief overview. I mean, you've heard from all these great speakers tonight about multi-benefit projects and ways you can recharge groundwater and using stormwater or other aspects. Well, what we're trying to do in the county is also look at these more as a regional approach. And we're trying to develop what they call as a One Water framework that looks at these opportunities and to see if we can create, something that ties in with the great ideas of what you heard from all these other agencies and entities and working with landowners and communities to work together on multi-benefit projects. You've heard that a lot tonight, but also projects that support multiple benefits. And so again, as you heard, we're especially utilizing this type of approach for groundwater sustainability, primarily in the Solano Subbasin, but also throughout the entire county region and the unincorporated area. Now, the One Water framework the county is working on is an integrated approach that manages all types of water as a collective system. And it encourages agencies and entities and landowners to work together and for multi-benefit solutions, as I mentioned. For example, as you heard all tonight, about reducing floodwaters, but utilizing and capturing that water to support farmlands and also to recharge groundwater. So these are the kind of projects the One Water framework promotes. And it also works hand in hand in other planning efforts. And the framework itself is kind of a blueprint or a starting point for a utilities master plan in the unincorporated county region. And it also dives into some work that we're working on for drought resilience. So as we've seen over the past decade, and that was mentioned earlier part of this, we've seen drought is no longer a rare emergency, but it's a reoccurring challenge. And so there's small water systems and households that rely on private domestic wells, and these are particularly vulnerable to shortages during prolonged droughts. So to better prepare, the county is developing a drought resilience plan. And it's required by the state legislature, but it's also promoting actionable strategies for future droughts, and we know we're going to see those. So we've also formed a drought and water shortage task force, and where we're bringing together water agencies and representatives from different agencies and communities to really lead the voice and lead the effort and developing this planning effort. Now, so it's not just about planning, but it's also protecting public health and supporting agriculture and the water resources. So looking further ahead, the county is also working on a strategic agricultural initiative through a state-funded grant This effort's getting just underway, and it will help preserve working farms and ranch lands by supporting long-term economic viability of local food and ag systems. Together, these efforts, the One Water, the drought planning efforts, and the Strategic Agricultural Initiative, reflect the Solano County's commitment to long-term groundwater sustainability and collaborating with other agencies throughout the entire systems. So thank you. So now I want to turn it over to Martha of the Dixon RCD to provide more information.
Thanks, Misty. I am Martha McKean, and I work for Dixon Resource Conservation District. The Dixon and the Solano RCD, we partner together to create the coalition, which is the Dixon Solano Resource Conservation Water Quality Coalition, which is quite a mouthful. And what we do is we assist landowners to stay up on their requirements for the Irrigated Lands Program. And most of you should know by now that the Irrigated Lands Program, it's been around for over 20 years. It is a state-regulated program, and its purpose is to protect water from farms being discharged off of farms and that may have pesticides and other materials, or even as we talk about groundwater, of course, leaching past the root zone to possibly contaminate the groundwater. So that's the basis of the Irrigated Lands Program. And currently we have over 119,000 acres enrolled in the program, and that is about 98% of the eligible irrigated land that's within the Solano County. So you've heard from so many different people, so I'm not going to go into a ton of details about that, but we do a lot of collaborative work with all of the agencies. You've heard, obviously, we're partnership with Solano RCD for the coalition, but we work with all of the different entities that you heard from as far as for water quality. And as a grower in the Irrigated Lands Program, your responsibilities are obviously to use your best management practices when you're on the farm, and the annual farm reporting and payments, of course, and the education requirements. Now, the education requirements, you're at this meeting right here, and if you're a member of the coalition, you can check that off the box because this certainly counts. As far as the data that we collect, the required data that you have to enter into the online system, parts of those pieces you have graciously offered to share. And so we do share that with the JSA. They compile it and fill a lot of those data gaps that we didn't have. And Nick, in his presentation, Nick from Ludorf and Scalmanini spoke about some of those data points on that map he showed. And so those items are crucial, and your help is crucial for doing that. And send out tons of emails on outreach programs that talk about groundwater recharge and the drinking water wells, that program that was brought up with all those red dots on that map that shows the high nitrogen nitrate as nitrogen levels above 10 milligrams per liter. That program is a state-run program, but it does coincide with those that are enrolled in the Irrigated Lands Program. If they have a drinking water well that's on a parcel, that is a requirement for them to test the nitrates in their well. So all of this together, all of the different entities, we work together for the bottom line is to protect groundwater and surface water for generations to come. And so it's an important part, and you as a landowner and a grower are part of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Martha. And I just want to really thank the folks who have presented from other programs. And on the next slide, I want to thank all of you in the call. We had a poll that we put in earlier asking about groundwater related efforts others are interested in and practicing. And in terms of answers to that poll, you can see folks talked about keeping the ground covered all year, both in crop, but folks have, many of you have so many ideas. And as Martha talked mentioned, you know, between the work of Solano RCD and Dixon RCD and the other programs that we've heard about, we're really interested to talk with you. So wanted to just mention that. I'm also, if we go to the next slide, want to mention that we will be sharing in the chat. We put in some links to the programs that Martha and Misty were talking about. We also are putting in links to a dry wells program. On the next slide, just want to mention that there's lots of other opportunities. So for example, one of the links we're putting in the chat, the Community Alliance with Family Farms and the Center for Land-Based Learning are hosting a sustainable groundwater panel in July. So that's going in the chat, and we appreciate, you know, the chance for all of these different efforts to work together towards sustainable groundwater management. And with that, the next slide really just shows the timeline that Alex put up at the beginning. And just want to mention, you know, we're in this journey as Alex described, and thanks for the 20% of you who didn't know what the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act stood for, what SGMA stood for. You now have a sense of the journey that the subbasin and statewide that different subbasins have been on since 2014 when that act passed. If you go to the next slide, we want to really encourage all of you to stay engaged with the effort. We have a survey in both English and in Spanish, and that survey will give us feedback, things that you're looking forward to hearing more about. Wanted to acknowledge that many of you heard about this via the newsletter, and you can use that survey to sign up for the newsletter. You can get involved with the resource conservation districts that were represented here. Misty talked about the One Water Initiative going on in the county. You can also stay engaged by attending your groundwater sustainability agency board meetings. So just want to really thank those of you who have been here and invite you to spread the word. I think a few of you heard about tonight via word of mouth. And so that really does spread around, and want to thank you for all the questions that you asked today. So if we can go to the next slide, you know, as you've heard, this work on groundwater is essential. It has so many folks involved, and you're such a big part of it. So we really appreciate your feedback. So do take time before you hang up from this call to answer that survey. Go ahead and open the link now to offer your input. And for anybody, if anybody does want to type in a last question, if we are out of time this evening, but we can answer it in the summary that we'll provide on solanogsp.com. So I'm going to give everybody a couple moments of silence while you open up that survey. And then I want to just go to the next slide to really say thank you to all of you. Thanks to those of you who are listening in English and also in Espanol. Thanks to our translators, Ryan and Claudia. And thanks to all of the panelists who shared their program, not just this year, but in previous years, which you can watch. So just want to really thank you for joining this evening. I know your time is valuable, and give us feedback on what you found useful and what you'd like more of in the future. So thanks to all of you. We're going to end this recording, but it will be available on the web in a couple weeks. We really appreciate all of you being here. Thanks so much.